Open a jar of nutmeg and it seems ordinary, brown, fragrant, inexpensive. 4 centuries ago, the same seed sat at the center of a struggle involving Asian merchants, Bandanese producers, European companies, forts, treaties, and mass violence. The geography makes the story almost unbelievable. Nutmeg and mace came from a small volcanic island group in the Banda Sea, in what is now eastern Indonesia. 4 generations, people in Banda cultivated the trees and traded their harvest into older regional networks. Then outsiders tried to transform a connected trade into an exclusive monopoly. This is not simply a story about Europeans discovering a spice. It is about a place that was already known and what happened when knowledge, profit, and armed power met there. The nutmeg tree produces a fruit with 2 valuable spices. Inside the flesh is a hard seed, nutmeg. Wrapped around that seed is a brilliant red, lace-like covering called mace. Once dried, both became prized ingredients in food, medicine, fragrance, and elite consumption. For a long period, the Banda Islands were their original and sole commercial source. Volcanic soil, tropical rain, and maritime climate supported the trees. But the fruit did not sell itself. Bandanese knowledge turned orchards into harvests, and local sailing connected the islands to wider exchange. Every distant merchant who handled nutmeg depended on skills and decisions made close to these trees, even if later European accounts pushed those producers into the background. Before Portuguese, Dutch, and English companies competed in the region, Eastern Indonesian spices already moved through Asian networks. Traders connected Maluku with Java, Malacca, and ports farther west. Goods, people, and information traveled in several stages. A merchant in the Indian Ocean did not need to sail personally to every island where a spice grew. Bandanese communities negotiated with visiting traders and were not isolated from the world. This matters because the phrase Age of Discovery can place Europe at the beginning of everyone else's history. In Banda, European arrival was a new and disruptive chapter in a much older maritime system. Outsiders did not reveal Banda to global trade. They entered a trade that already existed, then tried to control its terms. Ordinary trade accepts competition. A monopoly tries to eliminate it. The Dutch East India Company, the VOC, wanted Bandanese nutmeg sold on terms it could dictate and distributed through channels it controlled. Agreements were backed by forts, ships, and force. Producers who traded with other buyers threatened the company's desired system, even when such trade followed older local practice. The conflict was therefore not only about price. It was about sovereignty, who could decide where harvests went, who could enter a port, and who had authority over land and labor. The VOC could describe its demands as contracts. Bandanese communities could experience the same demands as an attack on their freedom to trade and govern themselves. The surviving landscape makes the scale of the obsession visible. Fort Nassau rose near the waterfront of Banda Nera, followed by Fort Belgica on higher ground. Warehouses, administrative buildings, and defenses helped turn a volcanic harbor into a guarded commercial system. A fort does more than protect goods from an enemy fleet. It watches movement, concentrates weapons, and makes economic rules physical. Nutmeg groves grew on land. The monopoly depended on controlling the sea around them. Ships were the only practical connection between the islands, and maritime power allowed the company to restrict competitors, enforce agreements, and move spices toward Batavia and European markets. In 1621, Governor-General Jan Pietersoen Cohen led a VOC campaign against the Banda Islands. The result was catastrophic. Bandanese leaders were executed. Communities were attacked, killed, expelled, enslaved, or displaced. Estimates vary because records are incomplete and colonial documents have their own agendas, but the central fact is not in doubt. Violence destroyed much of the existing Bandanese society and broke resistance to the company's monopoly. This history should not be softened into a story of efficient trade. The plantation system that followed was built after conquest and depopulation. When we speak about the global success of nutmeg, we must also speak about the people whose lives were treated as obstacles to profit. The VOC divided nutmeg land into plantations often called pequen. European leaseholders supervised production, while enslaved and coerced laborers, many brought from elsewhere, worked within the new system. The company regulated cultivation and tried to destroy trees outside approved areas to preserve scarcity and price. This was an engineered economy. Forts protected it, administrators measured it, ships carried it, and violence maintained it. Yet colonial control was never as complete as official plans imagined. Smuggling, resistance, ecological uncertainty, and competing powers complicated the monopoly. The very need for constant enforcement reveals its fragility. A spice tree grows slowly. A ship can sink. A seed can be carried away. Pulau Run became a focus of English and Dutch rivalry. The English East India Company established claims there, while the VOC sought control of the entire Banda Group. The 1667 Treaty of Breda ended the Second Anglo-Dutch War and recognized a wider settlement. The English retained New Netherland, including Manhattan, while Dutch possession of Run was accepted. This is often compressed into a memorable line: Manhattan was traded for a nutmeg island. The line captures nutmeg's value, but it can mislead. The treaty resolved multiple territorial and commercial disputes. 2 islands were not exchanged like coins across a table. The more accurate story is still remarkable. Tiny Run and distant New Amsterdam belonged to the same global contest. A monopoly based on one plant in one place contains its own weakness. If viable seedlings escape and grow elsewhere, geography stops protecting the price. Over time, nutmeg cultivation spread beyond Banda to other tropical colonies and regions, including places under British control. The VOC's exclusive system weakened. This did not undo the harm already inflicted on Bandanese communities, nor did it end exploitative plantation labor. It changed the map of production. A crop once tied to a tiny archipelago became global. The seed traveled more easily than the history attached to it, which is why nutmeg can sit in a kitchen today without any visible trace of Banda. The phrase spice trade sounds colorful and adventurous. It can hide unequal power. Spices moved through networks that created opportunity, cultural exchange, and wealth, but also coercion, slavery, conquest, and ecological control. Different periods must not be collapsed into one moral picture. Pre-European Asian trade was not identical to VOC monopoly, and European companies did not invent maritime commerce in the region. The crucial change in Banda was the attempt to make armed corporate rule control production itself. A joint stock company exercised military and governmental power far from Europe, showing how corporate finance and colonial violence could reinforce each other. The Banda Islands are not a frozen memorial to the 17th century. People live there, fish, cultivate nutmeg, maintain traditions, and navigate a marine environment of extraordinary biodiversity. Colonial forts remain part of the landscape, but so do volcanic slopes, reefs, villages, and living Bandanese memory. Present-day heritage must therefore do more than preserve picturesque walls. It should recognize violence, survival, and local knowledge. The island's history continued through Dutch colonial rule, Indonesian independence, and later change. Treating Banda only as the place that Europeans fought over repeats the old mistake of making outsiders the main characters. Now return to that small brown seed. Its aroma carries no automatic lesson. History comes from the relationships we recover around it: growers and traders, sailors and laborers, contracts and cannons, islands and distant markets. Nutmeg helped connect Banda to the world long before European conquest. Then the desire to monopolize it devastated a society and reorganized the islands. Later, the tree escaped the monopoly and the spice became ordinary. The next time nutmeg appears in a recipe, remember the place behind it and ask a larger question. Which other everyday objects have histories that disappeared when their price became cheap?